relationship between gay people, the gay community, and the trans community is extremely complicated, partly because the trans community itself is so multidimensional. The New York Times says that 19% of trans people are heterosexual. You know, when you get into discussing what it is that makes a man and what it is that makes a woman, if you eliminate genitalia, you get into the discussion of what it really is to be male or female in our society, how they should interact. And that's the reason I believe that the trans debate has become so central to the debate in our society, because it really relates to the role of women, the role of men, responsibility, the duties in raising children, and all those things which tie into that debate. And for some reason, the gay community has always viewed trans people as an embarrassment, because some of them were cross-dressers or would be too effeminate or they'd be too masculine. And we didn't even have a term for trans people until about 10, 15 years ago. I mean, it wasn't known. You had the term transsexual created in the 80s. But when I was young, we only had terms like drag queen or screaming queen. And looking back, I realized some of those people were drag in the sense they were performers, rather than really serious people who felt like their gender was different than the one assigned at birth. And real transsexuals who were people, I remember a boy in college who scandalized town by going to work as a female waitress in a drive-in restaurant in the late 50s. And this was just incredible. And looking back, I realized he was a transsexual. Very sweet, beautiful boy. I hope that the communities will have a better understanding of themselves. And I think in that process, the whole society, because what you're really talking about in trans issues is the issues of relationships between individual human beings and how complicated they are, and how both parties should have the right to determine whether they're a housekeeper or whether they're a wage earner and things like that. The options are multiplied for everybody in a free society, not limited by the roles assigned to them because they're male or female. And that's the issue, I think, which really is spilling over into the public today.
So my involvement with the park actually began in 1994 when I moved to the West Village. And I lived down the block, so I walked past it all the time. And being so close to the park and so close to Stonewall, the momentous occasions that happen that involve the gay community are ones that I hear literally from my bedroom. So when marriage equality was passed in New York State, I heard about it because of the cheering and all the noise that was happening outside of Stonewall before I read about it in the newspaper, even saw it on the news. That's how close and involved it is. My more direct involvement with the park really began in 2013. Because I lived in the neighborhood, I'd seen how the park had really fallen into disrepair. The Parks Department here doesn't really get enough funding to do high maintenance in all its parks. So the park had really, the irrigation system had fallen apart, and we really had nothing more than yews, ivies, and rats in the park. And it just looked really sad. So a number of folks in the community got together. We created the Christopher Park Alliance, and we got together and raised funds to put in new irrigation, all new plants, and really renovated the park. It was really a labor of love. All volunteers, the donations were coming in at $50 or $100 at a time, and we raised like close to $35,000 to renovate the park. We're very proud of that. So when news of this park perhaps becoming a national monument, we were initially a little weary. The idea of having a new landlord, one in Washington, D.C., take over the park was a little scary to us, because we just figured out how to work with the bureaucracy in City Hall here in New York City. But after spending a good deal of time with the National Parks Conservation Association, which was leading the charge for this becoming a park, and the National Park Service, well, they won us over. And very quickly, we were on board 110%.
Well, what it meant for me was a little bit of freedom, though, that night. You know, it was, I could, yell and get back at the cops and for all the things that they've done to me. You know, most of my ribs are broken because of the police, so it was a chance for me to get back at them that night, and yell and throw things. And for the community, I think we stood on our feet. We were proud, Pride started, I think, that night. We all stood up together. And it didn't matter whether you were trans or lesbian or a gay man or butch femme. It didn't matter. We all stood up together, and said, no, it's going to stop, And I think that's where our pride really started. It's those nights.